Oh boy, am I hungry. I want fries, a hamburger. No, make that 2 fries. You want anything? What's your special today?
Episode 4. Welcome to another episode of the Northwest Builders Lunch Hour. Today we have a great lineup. I'm having lunch today with Mark Clawson and Erik Jensen from the City of Olympia. Mark and I have worked together for a long time, back from his roots as a builder. Erik and I know that we've met in the past, but not a whole lot, so we're going to get to know each other better today, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Our mission here at the Northwest Builders Lunch Hour is to gain insights and information that bring value to builders in the Pacific Northwest, and we're going to enjoy a lunch and a good conversation while we do that. So I want to make sure that I get your titles right, and I should have brought this up before we sat down, but as I understand it, Mark, you are a field inspector.
We call it construction inspector.
Construction inspector.
Handles the civil work in the City of Olympia and public works projects.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for clarifying that. And Erik, you are a plans examiner?
Building official.
Okay, I'm all over the place here.
So the building official, so I run the plans examining and the inspection, construction inspection, and code enforcement.
Okay, all right, great. Well, thank you for clarifying that. I apologize for my misunderstanding. Fortunately, I wasn't too far off.
No.
But, we are enjoying lunch from the Brick today. And let's just go ahead and jump into it. I'd like to start out just with a little bit of history. Mark, if you don't mind if I start with you.
No problem.
We've worked together for a long time, but tell me a little bit about, kind of where you got your start in the construction industry, what led you that direction, and then how'd you end up where you're at now?
Okay. I was newly married. I'd been working kind of a farm retail job, and decided that I came to a realization that wasn't for me. And I had known a man in town with a construction company who had offered me a job a couple of times, and you probably know Alan Bodenhammer back in the day. And I went into Alan's office one afternoon and said, "Hey, you still need some help?" And he said, "Yeah, go out to this job on Monday." And that's how it started.
Yeah.
From there, I joined the Carpenters Union.
Okay.
And I went through the apprenticeship, and I stayed in the union for about 7 years doing commercial schools, fire station,
Right.
that type of.
Were you able to do that locally, or did you have to travel a bit for that?
Mostly relatively local, Tacoma was about as far as I really had to go. I was pretty fortunate.
Yeah, no kidding.
And as he closed down, Bodenhammer Inc. Retired and shut down, I went to Corsmo and worked for Corsmo for a while. And then I got a bright idea to go out on my own and do some residential construction. And that was about 2003, I think, and did that for about 10 years.
Yep.
And that's where we kind of connected, started doing my trusses.
Yeah.
And I hung in there through 2013, and then took a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at a certain point, I was encouraged to come try and get on at the City of Olympia, and I did that. Came in through Public Works and
Right.
drove truck for about 3 or 4 years. Then I was a lead over that department for a couple years, and just last summer slid over to engineering.
Yeah. Excellent.
So now that's where I'm at.
Yeah. We'll touch a little bit later on how the experience that you've had has benefited you where you're at now, but because I'm sure that you had to deal with people who were doing the role that you're doing at this point.
Yeah.
As a builder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Erik, I'd ask you the same question.
All right. A lot of similar stories. Well, I started off going to college, of course, and then Went through about 3 years of the 4 years in college.
Right.
And, that story. And then came back, and actually when I was up, I went to Western, and when I was up there, I was in a nice evening job was being a bouncer.
Oh.
And so when I came back down here, I was a bouncer at a place. Well, the main guy was a contractor also who worked. So he was like, "Hey, you want to come frame with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like a good gig."
Yeah.
And that was in the early 90s, probably 92. And so anyways, I worked with him for a couple of years and kind of bounced around. I remember working on a commercial job and just looking down, and this is in the early 90s. Things were a little bit rougher back then. And there were guys
like rough around the edges?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I remember one guy that was on some new kind of drug that kept him up all day and working all night, and you're just like, this isn't necessarily the industry for me.
Right.
My cut man had probably 3 fingers left, and he was about ready to retire. And just looking long term, hey, this isn't going to work. So I really, really, really did my best to get out of construction. Went and drove truck and did a bunch of other things. Always kind of bouncing back to construction because that's what I knew.
Right.
And then one day, my wife was like, "Hey, what do you want to do when you grow up?" And I pretty much I said, I keep going back to construction. I want to go do that.
Yeah.
And so we kind of made a point of it. And like Mark, actually the same year, in 2003, I started my general contracting business. And we did residential and light commercial. And, I went through the recession, I landed all the way till, it got to the point where my wife was like, "Okay, this is great." But, I was working 7 days a week, and I promised her, hey, I'd take half of Sunday off, and that will be our weekend. I'll be home by 12, 1 o'clock on Sunday, and then we'll go to the movies or go do something. Well, she finally put her foot down, and she's like, "You need to go get a job." And and I didn't know what to do. I had no clue. I'm not going to go work at Home Depot or something. I just, no offense against Home Depot, but that'd drive me nuts. And I'm not going to go pound nails. And my body was starting to wear out. And, I got a knee brace on now on my shoulder and right.
Yep.
Arm is pretty messed up. But anyhow, I had a guy, the Centralia building official, that kept saying, "Hey, you should get into working on the government side." And no. Well, finally I said yes, and there was no jobs open, but I just wanted to go get my certification, just in case something ever, became available. And so I went and got my certification. Well, actually, that's a whole interesting story in and of itself.
Then we'll want to hear it.
The LG Nelson was the building official down there.
Yep, great guy.
Yeah, and he's the one that kept trying for years and years. And he kept telling me what school I needed to go to, all that kind of cool stuff. And I finally called him up. And I had done some things because he said, "Can you at least go get this certification so if we have a flood, you can help me out there?
Right.
Can you go get this certification if we have a earthquake? Just go get these." And they were just 1-day type certifications. And so I'll help you out if we have a big disaster. Well, I finally went back to LG and said, "Okay, tell me the name of this place to go get my certification." And he laughed at me, of course, and I said, "No, this is the last time." And so I was contracting and kind of figured out, and it was like 4 months in advance, that I was going to go back to Colorado to go take this test.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, in between that, LG called me up, and he's like, "Hey, I think I'm going to try to go get a job with the library system.
Oh, okay.
And I said, well, who's taking your spot? Like that.
Right.
And so anyways, that's how that ended up, is I went to Colorado, got my testing, knowing that I had to pass, and then come back and apply for his old vacant position.
Yeah.
And so that's where I started.
Boy, he was strategizing.
Yeah.
Well ahead of time. You're my exit strategy, buddy.
I know.
I didn't even know.
I was just a pawn in his game.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool. So, so you ended up with the City of Olympia at that point.
City of Centralia.
City of Centralia at that point, and then eventually, how did you end up at the City of Olympia? Or
City of Centralia was a wonderful place to work. I love them. They're like family still. And they helped me. They had a very, they were very supportive of me getting all my certifications. So I went and got my residential inspector certification, which is the bare bones basic one.
Yeah.
And then they supported me, and I went as fast as I could, and I went and got my commercial inspection, and then my plans examiner commercial, and then there's 3 different tests for the building official.
Right.
And went and got all those different certifications, and actually did it all, and they were so supportive, and it has a lot to do with that, them being that supportive. Did it in about 3 years.
Okay. Yeah.
And in the meantime, making sure, Centralia was still moving. And at that time, it was one of the most busiest times for the city of Centralia. That's when the big warehouse went in out in Galvin. And we
The
had,
UNFI.
Yeah, UNFI.
Yeah.
And then we had 3 schools at that time, 2 new elementary schools, and then the remodel of the high school.
Right. Yeah. Boy, I kind of forgot that was all going on at the same time.
All at the same time,
Yeah.
and that was all mine, and so anyways, it was my learning curve was incredible, because when you're dealing with that, I wasn't used to tilt up, cold storage warehouses that are 500,000 square feet, you know, and then another 500,000 or 800,000 square foot dry storage, I had no exposure to that.
Yeah.
I'd never even been inside one of those
You're
buildings.
in the deep end.
Yeah, so you got to learn pretty quick.
Yep.
And that was just a good experience. I appreciate what they did. And then, unfortunately, they're just a small town, and it's only 35 minutes up the freeway in Olympia, and
Yep.
and the building official at the time in Olympia kind of came to me and was like, "Hey, I'm not planning on being here much longer. Another somebody else's exit plan,
Yep.
and so they had a vacancy for a plan reviewer, and so I took that in anticipation that I'd be the building official
Right.
here as well. And he ended up leaving a year earlier than he had anticipated.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So I was kind of thrown into the deep end of the pool pretty quick, and with Olympia. And so,
Yeah.
anyways.
Well, it sounds like a good opportunity for someone who's willing to take the challenge on. Saying that cleanly.
Yeah, my wife, I reference her a lot, I guess, but she asked me, how was your day at work? And it was an adventure. Every day's an adventure at Olympia.
Yeah, that's. I'm sure there's a lot to learn all the time.
Yeah.
So, this kind of historically, as I've worked in the industry, I've seen a lot of builders become plans examiners, field agents, and now building officials. And that seemed to be where most of the people that were in the plans department or the building and development department would come from. And mostly anecdotally, what I hear is that that's not really the direction things go anymore. Is it still pretty typical for builders to be moving into that? I hear a lot about people having more of a college track toward working in that part of government.
We've had a lot of transition in our group And as Eric knows, we pretty much turned over all the construction inspectors, starting with me coming in. But that wasn't the trend in this for us. We've got a dirt excavation contractor that is now a construction inspector. Did that for probably 25 years.
Yep.
And then a paving foreman from Lakeside that has joined our team.
Well, that's good to hear.
So, yeah.
I would agree. I know two of our last, we had one transfer. He transferred from Kansas. Of our last few employees, one plans examiner, he transferred from Kansas. But he was a former contractor prior to that. And then our last inspector that was hired, he was a contractor for Forma.
Okay.
And then he worked for Forma and then went to Thurston County maintenance department, came from that.
Right.
And then he's a great inspector. I mean, just absolutely has done a great job. So I do have, since I got to Olympia, as every industry is experiencing, just this tough to find employees.
Yeah.
So since I got to Olympia, I've kind of started a succession plan or training schedule where I can have an entry-level person get a good grasp of building and then either move over to the inspection or move over to the plan review. So although I haven't, to answer your question, in my department, we still are pretty heavy with people that have been in the trades. I'm looking at our future and going, okay, it's going to be harder and harder. When the trades can't fill positions,
right,
it's going to get harder for me to cherry pick the good ones out of the trades to be good inspectors. So I better start developing.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, I know. Let's see, how shall I say this? I like to highlight the fact that the construction trades generally are a good opportunity for people that aren't necessarily on a college track. If you're in high school and you like working with your hands and you're sharp enough to learn how to read a set of blueprints and operate tools safely and that sort of thing, you can make a good career without needing to go directly into college. Now, for a lot of the builders that I've worked with over the years, getting into building development has been a good career path. And there's some schooling involved in that, but that can be done, it sounds like, as you're working toward it while you're keeping a job and that sort of thing. So I just always like to promote that. Personally, I started out while I was going to school, the whole two or 3 years out of 4 thing, and the roof truss industry, the component industry was always just such a good opportunity, that I stuck with it. So, and I see that all over construction. So
when I finally joined the Carpenters Union, I was upset that I wasn't introduced to that through my school in some way. I thought, boy, what a great opportunity for someone who's not going to be on a college track to go and get on-the-job training, essentially, and the unions offer incredible training. Very specific and good wages. And it doesn't have to be a union apprenticeship program. That's what I was getting at. There's other apprenticeship programs too that are state sponsored and like that. So
awesome. So tell me a little bit about what it is that you do in your job today. What is it like to be a civil inspector?
Okay. So we pretty much everything underground and sidewalks on down. So and that can be for a private development project. Maybe somebody's doing a short plat to put in a new small neighborhood, or down to the single family home who's responsible for 85 feet of frontage improvement on a existing street. And so we work with them on how to best install and meet the code requirements, because that brings in some ADA requirements that builders may not be familiar with.
Oh, sure.
Especially in the fill-in lots. And then we also do inspection on the public works projects, which is another big part of our process, and that's has a lot to do with material tracking,
Right.
and work progression. So that we're making sure that those are getting funded properly. And
Right. And with the public works projects, are those sometimes done in-house and sometimes contracted out, or?
mostly contracted out, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. What's your typical initial contact with the builder in that process?
Well, probably once the bid's awarded, then we do a pre-construction meeting with engineering staff.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's led by the project engineer on that, and we've got a project manager, and maybe sometimes more than one, depending on the size of the project, and then the inspection staff and the superintendent and foremans and all that.
Get everybody involved
Yep,
early.
that's our initial. And sometimes it's quick and easy, and sometimes it's multiple meetings to get ready to start.
Right. But yeah, I imagine that having that early pre-construction meeting must help it go a lot smoother as the project is going
Absolutely,
along.
absolutely. And we try and do that with our private development projects too. They're on their own, but we do require a pre-construction meeting, and a lot of it can preemptively solve a lot of conflicts or issues.
Right.
And we can talk to them about process, because a lot of those are different, especially on the single-family homes. We still do it. It's a smaller scale. Sometimes it's just a phone call. But we'll talk through a build. I have got one going right now with an owner builder, and they need some guidance.
Right. I'm sure they do. How about you, Eric?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Absolutely, yeah.
Can I ask Mark a question?
I'd love you to. Yeah, please. This is a conversation.
I know. Well, it's just what percentage would you say is public works versus private development? Of just your general, work day.
Right now, it's probably 60% private development, 40%. But I can see that kind of goes in phases because of the
cycles, because of summertime. You're doing
sometimes the
these
public works projects, when they fire up, they'll take almost all of our time.
Gotcha.
And then we're passing the private development stuff off, because their projects might be a year long to build a hotel, and they've got a big parking lot. So
it really could be closer to almost 50-50.
Yeah,
which is far greater than I thought.
Yeah, and the public works projects, even though there's less of them, they require a lot more time on site. Because we track everything, every person. We've got responsibilities to do interviews with wage rate interviews and things like that. Make sure people are making the money that they're supposed to be making. We track all the equipment. We check all the material.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if at any time, Mark, you got a question for Eric or vice
Well, yeah.
versa.
I mean, we are the same team, but we're
Different floors.
Different
and we
floors,
see each
yeah.
other often, but we just don't interact as commonly as we would like.
I get it. In the few of these that I've done with people that I work with every day, I learn stuff about them. And I love it. It's great. So the question was, what is a day like for you? What do you do as a building official?
It's
because
not
we don't
exciting.
know. We don't
Meetings.
know. Yeah, meetings. Okay.
Meetings.
Yeah.
Zoom meeting this, Zoom meeting that. Well, also, part of there's just a lot of stuff outside of construction that I deal with. I deal a lot with, because of code enforcement and the housing aspect. I'm kind of a natural person to be brought in on the homeless issue.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and then also in climate programs, I'm brought in a lot on that.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's marrying with what the state building code council is doing, and as sometimes the ideas will be pushed, and they won't understand they'll want to know the full replications of what our plans examiners would have to do, what our inspectors would have to do. And just making a ruling might have a lot of consequences that are going to be really difficult in the future. We're not. Olympia is unique. There's only 49 other building officials like me that are building officials of state capitals.
Oh, right. Okay.
You know, and you have a uniqueness about that we're on the front edge of everything. Yet we're just a small town.
Yeah.
You know, we're just at 60,000 people,
Right.
And so it's very unique dynamic on that. And so I just kind of navigate through that on a daily basis.
Right.
And then every once in a while, taking care of, kind of the higher level questions. If the design team has an issue on something, and obviously the code's a very gray area document, and a lot of it, my primary philosophy is what's the intent of the code. And so there will be determinations that there's only one person can make that determination, because you can read the exact same sentence one way and you can read it an opposite way. Just depends what you emphasize.
Right. Yeah.
And what word is emphasized.
Yep.
And fortunately ICC gives us code and commentary, they give us interpretations, they give us a lot of tools, but ultimately it comes down to we're trying to make a safe building, and how are we going to do it based off of with our code, and what is the safest option with that decision. I guess it's kind of I don't know if I'm articulating correctly, but those big level decisions that I don't expect. I mean, I've got a great staff. They take care of 99% of everything, but every once in a while something manages. And then there's procedural stuff. We were going to have a code change here July 1st.
Right.
And so I've had a lot of questions on developments. Okay, if I turn in one building of 7, do I get vested under the 2018 code for all the rest? Those type questions.
Right.
Where, what's your procedure? What is the minimum standard that I have to get in to be vested before that code changes? And now the questions are, we were going to do this under the 2021 code, but since we've got an extra 120 days, maybe we're going to do this under the 2018 code. So
interesting.
Just procedural type questions on what our rule is. And
right. Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of clarification that has to take place on that.
Exactly.
I hadn't ever considered before, and I appreciate you bringing this up, the fact that, Olympia is the capital. It's been my experience that Olympia is early to adopt, Thurston County is early to adopt, and then that trickles out to the other jurisdictions. And it just hadn't ever occurred to me that, you're kind of the spearhead. You're setting the example for the rest of the state. And I can imagine with the resources, being not much more than a town, of 60,000, that's challenging. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty great.
It's really nice, though. One thing that is a nice advantage that I think I have over others is I have Tumwater and Lacey, great relationships with Al and Wade, the building officials at the other jurisdictions, and Chris with the county. And so we work together on a lot of these questions.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm doing this. This is what I think. And then they'll change my mind, especially those two. All three of them have I was building when they were inspecting my stuff,
Right.
Yeah. I mean, they've got a lot more, 2 of the 3 are going to retire the next year, you know? So, and then I'll be the old guy. No, but I bounce a lot off to them and ask them, hey, what do you think about this?
Right.
If I have any kind of question.
Yep. Not only good to have that extra perspective, but also have some consistency, because probably most of the builders that you're working with aren't only working in Tumwater, Lacey, or Olympia. They're also working in Thurston County, and yeah, some consistency for them hopefully is helpful.
And that's one thing that Mark brought up with the pre-construction meeting. That's just so valuable, because even though, just like you said, I try at the higher level to be consistent on those determinations. Our permitting software is different in all 3 of them. You know, there's just things that are different. So if you're a builder and you just got done building, 5 houses in Tumwater,
Yeah.
and then you come to Olympia, call for that, pre-construction meeting, and we'll tell you, hey, how to do your job. But this is how you do it here in Olympia with these little changes and our permitting software and calling for inspections. This is how we do it, and all those little things that can really make a job go smoother.
Yeah, you bet. That kind of transitions pretty well into some of the questions that I set up ahead of time. And I think it might be good to jump into those, and that'll carry this conversation on really well. So I'm not going to go through these in any particular order. I think I'll just start at the top. First question I've got is, what are the most common mistakes or issues you encounter during the building permit application process?
It's definitely going to be more of a Eric.
Pardon?
During the application process, because I just don't have that much involvement in that.
During the application process, probably the biggest concern is just not complete documentation. We, all jurisdictions, and I understand, because I was on the other side of the counter for years and years, and I did not realize the impact of how that complete documentation, how that makes a difference. I pull permits. I have a house out in Grayland. I have, rentals. I still pull permits. My whole perspective has changed on the completeness of the application. I don't mean just the application, but if they require a site plan, I understand why they require a site plan. It's like, it's a heat pump I'm changing. Why do you need a site plan of my whole house? Well, it's because it shows the inspector where to go.
Yeah.
Does he have to crawl in the back of the house, or can he just look at it from the front? There's just a ton of scenarios like that almost every jurisdiction has a checklist, and there's a reason for that checklist. Yeah, sometimes they are not applicable to your specific project, but try to, as complete as you possibly can make it. I tell people at the counter, I'm like, imagine you're trying to explain what you're doing to a 6-year-old, and I'm the 6-year-old. I don't know. I've never been to your house. I don't know what you got going on there.
Yep.
You need to paint a picture. So here in my office, I can take a look and see if it's going to be safe, if it's going to work. And the more information you can give me, the better, the smoother that process is going to be. The less questions I'm going to have to go back to you with, and here's my list of questions.
Right.
And really, that is the best thing you can do to expedite your permit, is just have a complete, go off the jurisdictional checklist, have as much, if not all, of everything on there.
Yeah.
Submit that, and then it's amazing. I can be on a plan set that they have not taken that, and I'm not excited to, especially back when I was doing plan review. I'm not excited to get into it, and it's so incomplete. I got to check everything, every single detail, versus you get to one where everything's laid out clean, everything's there. I don't have to, they've showed me the code path. We all know what the gray area questions are going to be. Mm-hmm. If you can lay out, hey, the code says this, I think that means this, this, and this, and I can then follow your code path and go, yeah, that makes sense. I agree with that. Or I can say, no, I don't agree with that, but I can articulate exactly why I don't, and we're on the same path, and we will get to a yes really quickly.
Right.
And so I can't stress that's the most important in making it smooth and easy.
Right. Playing the devil's advocate, I might say, all of this information that I have to compile, all of these extra sheets in my plans, that's all costing me money. It's taken me time to get those plans put together, and I'm just doing a heat pump. Okay, I understand now because you told me that, the inspector needs to know where to look. But, where is the value to me as the builder to spending all this time and money up front in documents that essentially they're not really going to help me build the building. I know what I'm doing out here.
I can answer that question really easy. And I say it because I do it myself. I obviously have not obviously, but I know how to do plans. I know how to read plans. I know how to draw plans. I can do everything. Does that mean I do that on my own projects? Absolutely not. I have Luke, who's worked on many, for my structural plans.
Yep.
Right. I have an architect do my plans. The reason being is because they will lay it out, these plans. I'll spend the extra, I don't get anything. I don't get anything. It costs me out of my pocket another $2,000 or whatever. But the time spent when it goes to Grays Harbor County for them to review it, that's where I make all of, if not more, of that money back. I've spent that money to get those plans, to get that documented, and now I'm going to push it through. I'm going to save a month. What's a month worth?
Yeah, it's
that's a lot of money in my book. To have that upfront cost, and then to be able to have these plans go smooth. You're also kind of setting a tempo for your job.
Yeah.
If everything's laid out, you're saying, hey, here's the documentation from my inspector. My inspector comes out, where's your whatever heat calculation? Oh, there it is. Okay. Yep. He says I need a 17,000 BTU, ductlet. Is that? Yep. I look at the tag. Yep. It's all right there. And it's natural for inspectors. If you find one problem, if the first thing you look at is a problem, from then on out, you're looking at that job with a fine-tooth comb. If the first thing you look at is really well laid out, yep, it complies. You look at the next thing, it complies. Okay, now I can kind of relax. This contractor knows what they're doing. They take pride. They're professional. They're a professional outfit.
Yep.
They take pride in what they're doing, their workmanship. I'm part of their team. I'm just double checking that a wall got nailed off because it was Friday afternoon and everybody got to go home early, and they missed that wall.
Right.
Most contractors, when I was out inspecting, were glad to have me on there because they're like, yeah, it's another set of eyes to make sure we all want this safe building.
Right.
And just making sure that everything gets done right. So it really sets the tempo for the whole project going forward. That documentation, all having the complete set. That's why I highly recommend it.
Yeah. An analogy comes to mind. You always hear you want to start your home with a good foundation. And it sounds like, this documentation is a foundation that comes even before your foundation. You're starting out with that.
Exactly right.
Mark, do you have any input on that from your perspective?
Well, like you said, the permit application process is not something I'm really a part of, just my past experiences, and I think Eric laid it out. When you go in ready and complete, this thing are smooth.
Yeah.
They just work.
Yeah.
So.
All right. I really enjoyed that. I think that filled in the perspective a lot. It's, well, like we talked about, you start with a foundation. I like that setting the tempo for the job. And I don't know how many times I've heard it, but it's more than once. Leave something obvious for the inspector to find so that they can just, check that off and move on. Is that a good tactic?
I never believed that when I was building. I don't know. Eric,
I say it a little tongue in cheek, but you guys know it's true.
I did it yesterday. No, and this was similar, but not related. It wasn't a code inspector, but it was a home inspector. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm just not going to fix that just so he's got something to, I'm selling a home. Mm-hmm. And anyways, so I can't say that I'm totally. Does that work? No. In hindsight, I probably did it. Yes, I did it. Mm-hmm. I don't recommend that.
Kind of going back to your earlier point of now I'm going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Yeah. Especially if that's the first thing they look at. Then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a change in the perception of me being on one side versus the other. Mm-hmm. I've heard, I still hear it, all these, you get a shear wall. Why? There's more nails in there than there's wood, and all this. Well, now I'm on this side, and it's my job to research that stuff and find out, okay, what does that really mean? Mm-hmm. Is there, they say 6-inch nail pattern. Does it really have to be 6? Does it really, what if it's 8? What if it's 10? Mm-hmm. Does that really matter? Well, all my research is yes, it completely matters. I watched the tests.
Yeah.
I watched the explosions of the wood. And does that mean, I'll use my same analogy. Does that, in my opinion, if you went 4 and then 8 and then 6, 6, 6, 4, 4, 8, that's not going to make as big a difference. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to get too wound up.
Right.
If you have a whole panel edge that's all 8-inch and it was called for 4, mm-hmm. I'm gonna make that call.
Yeah.
That makes a big difference. That's a huge difference.
Right.
Or 2 inches. I mean, you see shear walls that are 2-inch mm-hmm. edge nailing. 3-inch edge nailing. I'm gonna make sure it's pretty close and that there are the number of nails in that edge that's required.
Yeah.
Because that's really what makes that whole panel work together. So, and Luke is one of the architect or engineers that I've gone to and said, what really makes a difference here in the real world? What should I pay attention to?
Yeah. Get it right from the engineer.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing is like fire. I go on as many fire investigations as I can because there is not a single one that I have not learned something on how important it is on our side of preventive, life safety. I mean, our life safety and how we can prevent fire from spreading. Mm-hmm. I've seen some incredible things that have both made me more particular, and I've seen things that it's like, okay, that doesn't. In the real world, doesn't. I've seen this enough to where that just doesn't make a difference. That's just overkill,
right?
And it doesn't. It's not that big a deal. I mean, drywall. If you want to, I always said I wish I would have wrapped my kids in drywall because they would never. They're fire protected forever.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of that, and I've seen some pretty incredible things. Mm-hmm. I've also seen some pretty incredible things. Why a hole this big, how fire can spread through it, and
right.
And that's why, okay, when we're checking a firewall, we're making sure every single penetration is addressed.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Talking about the more nails than wood, that sort of thing. I'm not an engineer, and it's so easy. These conversations come up all the time. Oh, this is over-engineered. Well, is it? I don't know. I can't speak to that. It looks over-engineered, but when it comes down to the 2-inch spacing on the nailing, you hope the engineer understands how wood behaves when it has nails every 2 inches, and you just kind of trust that they understand it's going to split a little bit, but the testing shows that it works. So, yeah.
You're exactly right. I totally agree.
That's kind of an interesting one. I'm sure, Mark, in your experience as a home builder, you never thought anything was over-engineered.
No, never.
Yeah.
This meal was brought to you by Truss Components of Washington. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next hot dish. And feel free to invite a friend for lunch next time.